I think when you ask the question, what are the ways that slavery shows up in our day to day? Everything, everything. And I hate to be that person because it's like, well, Dr. Higgins, why are you always so negative? No, I'm not negative. I think it's important that we're cognitive because if we are not, then we fall back into the system of keeping the system propped up.
The opinions expressed by guests on Town Hall, a Black Queer podcast, are solely their own and do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of the podcast host, Bob the Drag Queen and Peppermint, the podcast production team, or the organization Black Queer Town Hall. Each participant is chosen for their unique perspective relevant to the theme of their featured episode. While we strive to provide a platform for diverse voices and narratives, individual opinions may vary, and listeners are encouraged to engage critically and respectfully with the content and the people presented. Hi, welcome to another episode of Town Hall, a Black Queer podcast with me, Bob the Drag Queen, and my co-host Peppermint. And this is the podcast where we journey through a theme by sharing stories, music, poetry, and art of varying depth and hilarity. And today's episode is To Freedom! Peppermint, to freedom.
Bob, what do you think about freedom? What does that mean to you? What does liberation mean to you?
Freedom is just another word for nothing left to lose, in the words of Chris Christopherson.
Okay.
Which is one of my favorite quotes about freedom. And when I think about the words "to freedom," I think about Nicki Minaj screaming it.
Of course.
I think it was a Breakfast Club or something. I can't remember where she was. It wasn't a Breakfast Club. It was some radio show where she was very upset and she was talking about Harriet Tubman and how she was not necessarily kind and sweet when she was leading people to freedom. And yeah, I really I also love songs about the songs entitled Freedom. We know that Kamala Harris famously used Freedom by Beyonce featuring Kendrick Lamar as her official campaign song. We know Aretha Franklin has a song. Is it called Freedom? No, it's not called Freedom. Freedom,
No.
freedom, oh freedom. What's the name of that song? Damn, is that what you want? Oh, Think. The song's called Think. She says freedom in the song Think. She does.
You better think.
And she screams freedom in a beautiful, beautiful way while singing that song. That's the song I used to lip sync that song back in the day. And by the way, if you are a drag queen lip syncing freedom, I highly recommend the Blues Brother rendition. They kind of up the tempo. Her voice is just in a different place than when she originally recorded, and it is a great rendition. So if you are a drag queen looking for a song to lip sync, you want to lip sync Freedom by Aretha Franklin, I highly recommend the one from Blues Brothers. It's a really good version.
Okay, I'm sending you something right now, Bob.
Okie dokie. What are you sending me?
You have to just listen to a few seconds of it because
is it a package in the mail?
Everything.
Is it money?
Yes. All of the above.
Is that Vanessa Williams?
Yes, and that's SWV.
That's I see SWV. Oh, Vanessa, we got the opening line. Ooh, that was really her moment. Vanessa Williams, y'all, can I just say real quick? Vanessa Williams. We don't give enough
We don't
credit.
give her props. We're about to because I can't wait to go see her in Devil Wears Prada on Broadway.
Because Vanessa Williams, the doors this woman has opened.
Yes, she has.
I mean, I remember listening to Sometimes the Sun Goes Round the Moon. Sometimes the snow comes down in June. Like, she is so elegant, so fierce. She was on an episode of Celebrity Drag Race, Super Duper Secret Celebrity Drag Race. And when they were saying when she walked in the room, everyone was like, well, obviously, some of the girls were like, well, we can't. What are we going to compete against a girl who literally won Miss America? Like, what the hell? Like, come on. You guys want us to literally compete against Vanessa? We're all celebrities. You want us to compete against Vanessa? And they were like, when she was there, she was one of the ones. She was down. She was like, I'm here to do the job. So if we're getting up in drags, I want to get up in yags, honey. I want the full. I want the pads. I want the gown. I want the hair. She is just. I've met Vanessa Williams one time because we did a cruise together, and just I love her. She's just a really sickening, sickening,
She's awesome. I
sickening
love her
woman.
very much. Yeah.
So Vanessa, I know
So
you
wait, we're
listen.
getting into this song though.
Oh, I was listening.
You
Sorry.
only hear the first line.
Well, to be fair, you said 10 seconds. There we go. The top comment says, "This is the official Juneteenth anthem. It's 2020, and this song needs to be on repeat on every Black radio station nationwide. The fact that it's 2024 and this is so relatable and relevant, especially for all Black women to be singing, this makes it even more important considering this nasty spirit of misogynoir in America," which we have an episode about misogynoir you're going to listen to.
Yes, we do.
This country won't ever change. Leave while you can. I told folks before, I'm not motherfucking leaving. But my family has
leave while you can.
My family has too much at stake. We have invested too much in this country for me to be leaving, honey. So this is where I live. This is where my ancestors were stolen and brought to. And God damn it, I'm gonna have my piece of the American pie.
What flavor is that? You know, sweet potato or pumpkin?
Oh, I assume that American pie is just apple, but I prefer sweet
well,
potato
let me
pie.
tell you. So apparently, when it comes to freedom, sweet potatoes were, sweet potatoes they have here, but they reminded us, Black folks in the South, of yams, which were more prevalent in Africa. And so that plays into the I won't say obsession, but the love for sweet potato pie in American South. Pumpkin pie was put forth. Pumpkin pie, the recipe for pumpkin pie was pushed during abolition. When I can't remember the name of the woman, Sally somebody, who was a homemaker and a baker and a sort of a competitive baker, something like that. She was like that day's Martha Stewart. She was like,
got it.
And she was friends with Abraham Lincoln and was very helpful in, I guess, advising during his administration in terms of like American home, how the country should be for the American homemaking. And she was basically started a campaign to let's introduce pumpkin pie because pumpkins were seen as a rebuke of the Southern way of life, but also a rebuke of slavery. And so it was it was very performative, I guess, for Northern Americans to use pumpkins in anything but pumpkin pie as an expression to subversively say we are for the abolition of slavery and we are against, the South, essentially.
Wait, pumpkins were pro-union?
Yeah.
Interesting.
I mean, pro-union, the union folks were pro-pumpkin. And I think the pumpkins really didn't care. But so working pumpkin pie into Thanksgiving, which was a new holiday that they were trying to push, which, that has its whole nother thing, but a way to unify the country. And we're going to unify the country and whitewash this experience of the indigenous genocide that our relatives created and committed by way of saying, let's have a meal to break bread, regardless of who you are. But the dessert that we're going to have to top it off is going to be something that says no more slavery.
Interesting. Her name was Sarah Joseph Hyde.
Sarah, okay, yeah, that's her.
Yeah, I did not know that. I mean, I will say, just from a flavor profile, I prefer sweet potato pie just because it's thicker.
It's got flavor.
And pumpkin pie is more custardy, I feel. But also the thing about pumpkin pie is, y'all, when you think of pumpkin flavored stuff, you're not actually talking about the flavor of pumpkin. You're talking about the flavoring of pumpkin.
Nutmeg and cinnamon and all the things that also the same spices that go into sweet potato pie.
So pumpkin spice is not taste. It does not taste like pumpkin. It tastes like the spices you use to make pumpkin sweet.
Cloves and cinnamon and allspice and nutmeg.
Essentially a sweet potato pie would be similar to a pumpkin pie, but the actual starch itself has sweetness itself. The starch itself is also sweet. So sweet potato pie tends to be sweeter. I do love a good sweet potato pie. I will say of the pies,
Of the pies.
the elite pie is gonna be your homegirl pecan pie or pecan pie based on where you're
Never,
from.
girl. Never, 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 never.
No, pecan
Never,
pie is
never,
that
never,
girl.
never, never, never gonna get it.
Listen, pecan pie will always be that girl. Pecan pie
No, she's
is
not.
who is it for you?
It's blueberry pie.
You're gonna sit here in my face and
And in your face.
tell
Yes.
me that in the pie pageant, you think Miss Blueberry, little Miss Tart Blueberry, is gonna outdo pecan pie?
Yes.
And
Because blueberry pie is unlike any other kind of pie. And I will tell you why.
I can't wait to
Because
hear,
blueberry pie, a fruit pie, of which there are many,
which I've been called.
hello, has obviously blueberries in it, and the berries retain their water in them. They keep their juiciness in them, and so when you eat a warm slice, blueberry pie is best served, I think, warm. Some of the fruit pies you can do cold or warm. I think they're better warm, but whatever.
Ice cream and ice
Blueberry
cream.
pie, yeah, with some ice cream,
Okay.
a la mode. The blueberry pie, those blueberries are quenching of your thirst. I think a pecan pie. I'm allergic to nuts,
Well, there's your problem.
contrary to popular belief.
So you're biased. You're biased.
However, I do know the flavorings that go into a pecan pie, and while I don't know the texture, I do believe that the pecans are a cross between, when they're cooked in the pie, crunchy and chewy.
Yes. Well, the ones on top tend to be crunchier.
Crisper, crunchy, and then chewy in the thing, which makes sense. While I'm allergic to it, I'll probably die if I eat some. I can imagine, just based on how it looks, that it might remind me, like if you can't have a pecan, if you order a pecan pie and they don't have it, then you will settle for a sweet potato pie.
They're so different, though.
But there's no substitute for a blueberry pie. There's just not.
I don't know. I'll have a rhubarb pie. I'll have a if they're like there's no
You are
blueberry.
so Southern. I love it.
Rhubarb pie is great.
Only with strawberries though. Strawberry rhubarb pie.
I love
not just regular plain.
I love a strawberry rhubarb pie too. I like my tangy pies.
You like it sour. You like to go like this when you eat that pie.
But the pecan pie has no. It's just it is. Baby, let me try right now. A pecan pie will hurt. It will hurt your teeth. It's like eating a Snickers. Some of y'all are too young. There's an age you hit where Snickers bars hurt your teeth. There is just an age you hit where you're like, is like my teeth hurt.
Oh shoot! I don't think I made that age, and I got new teeth.
Maybe it's the new teeth. maybe it's the new teeth. It's these old organic Bettys I have in me that are like, ooh, my teeth is tingling eating this piece of this Snickers. But anyway, that being said, I love to have a little bit of history on pie. One of my favorite quotes about freedom is, "No one is more hopelessly enslaved than the one who falsely believes they are free." You have any thoughts on that quote?
No one is more hopelessly enslaved than the one who falsely believes that they are free.
Yeah. If you think you're free, you never fight for. If you think you're free, why would you ever fight for freedom? You think you got it. I don't. I've tried to find where that quote is attributed to, and there's lots of sources, so I can't really find the actual. At this point, it's become like live, laugh, love, which they probably know where that came from. But it's like the poem Footprints at this point. Like I'm not 100% sure who said that quote, but I really love that quote. And I was watching the movie Wicked, and it is Wicked is a very deep film. And I think that casting a Black woman to play Elphaba really brings it home for some people who were maybe they just couldn't see it when there was a white woman singing the song, or being ostracized. But they're like, Oh, I see. Apparently, it was Johann Wolfgang von Goethe who said, "No one is more hopeless than faith without possibly they're free." And
Mm.
spoiler alert, which I can't believe I'm giving a spoiler alert for a book that was written in 1995, but spoiler alert for Wicked. There's a lot of parallels that are going on in our world today, and have been going on obviously since before
Mm.
1995 when the book was written, about essentially a revolutionary. Elphaba is a revolutionary, and she takes basically the hardest route there is to take when it comes to social justice,
Liberation.
liberation. Her activism is as extreme. I mean, she basically goes from being like the star pupil at school to being literally public enemy number one, like FBI's most wanted list for Oz, because she wants to stand up for a marginalized group, the animals. And it is animal rights, but in this place, the animals are anthropomorphized. They are humanized. So the animals are actually like talking and teaching in college and stuff, and the powers that be are trying to take the animals' rights away and use them to benefit themselves and to spy on people. And Elphaba finds out, and she's like, "I'll be damned!" And not only that, I am going to literally become an outlaw and stand up for these animals in her fight for freedom. Which is crazy because obviously she already had the freedom. She was free. She was the number one people. She was offered
Which I
power.
guess she realized that if other people were enslaved, which is what they were really trying to do, they weren't just trying to take away their ability to speak. They were actually enslaving the animals and making them to, putting them into servitude in a way that was, putting them literally in cages, like,
Yep.
and then making them serve them, which ends up playing out in The Wizard of Oz with the flying monkeys. There's so many ways. Obviously, the story connects literally because it's written
Yeah.
in as a prequel. But
And also
the
using
going
them
back to going
to
before.
subjugate
Oh
other people too. Also using
yeah,
using the animals to subjugate the other citizens of Oz and to spy on them and to use them. So it was like a very vicious loop.
love Wicked, but I want to go back a few minutes
Hmm.
uh, before you jumped into Wicked. The quote there, the I learned of Drapetomania, which was the Samuel Adolphus Cartwright invented Drapetomania to describe the psychological disorder that caused the phenomenon of enslaved Black folks in on this continent to want to run away from captivity before the Civil War. So basically, in an effort to normalize us being enslaved, it's sort of like the opposite of Stockholm syndrome. I guess the natural wanting to leave and get away from our captors. That alone, the yearning for freedom, was called a psychological disorder during chattel slavery, Drapetomania, and
That's the name for the disorder, Drapetomania.
mm-hmm, and
Interesting.
used to and nobody wants to be crazy, so they're like, oh, I guess why would I want to leave? Let me just stay here and keep working this thing. And it's just like all of these. It's the opposite. The sort of like what we're witnessing now in the world, and all of the work that goes into a lot of times the aggressor or the perpetrator portraying themselves as the victim also happens in Wicked. It happens, you know, throughout history. And even in this example, like the slaves are the crazy aggressors for wanting to have freedom. Why would they want to do that? And that coupled with God said that you're supposed to be slaves. It talk about subjugation,
I mean, to quote Michelle Williams, when Jesus said yes, nobody can say no. And Jesus said you were supposed to be a slave. So now what you gonna do? You gonna leave?
Exactly.
You gonna defy Jesus Christ? You really want to do
Not
that?
only are you sacrilegious, but you're also crazy. It's
Exactly.
yeah, that's
I
tough.
mean, I mean, the here's a question: do you feel free as an American, like in your position in America? Do you, Peppermint, feel like a free person?
I got to tell you, I do. This is the thing. It depends on your definition of freedom.
Mm-hmm.
And the definition of freedom, I think, naturally would change in one's life and in their mind as they get older and get more experience in life. My definition of freedom as it pertains to humanity and us as people has certainly changed and evolved and been awakened rather over the years, especially more recently. Uh, when it comes to freedom, I specifically remember after 9/11, and I had a very specific reaction to 9/11 because I worked at the World Trade Center right, that year. I was not at work at the World Trade Center on 9/11, but I did work there. And many of the people, I worked in a store. I worked in a perfumery, which I mentioned
in the last episode. Yeah.
in the last episode. And I know that many of the people that I would see, I worked in the mall in Building 5, which is the lower level at the World Trade Center, 5 World Trade. And there was lots of stores. There was a mall. And so people would come through, but it was the kind of mall that like really only the commuters would go through. And so the people who worked on the campus of the World Trade Center, which was 7 buildings, would go, and half those people lived in Jersey, would go through to the transit, and on their way through would stop in our store and all the stores in the mall. There's, a way to extract money from people before they're going home. And so we would see the same people every day, same like clockwork. And so many of those people I know did not make it. And so not only did I experience that sense of loss, but also the fact that I lived in New York and the fact that we were attacked in such a way and that there was such a horrendous attack, I felt very personal. I took very personally. And then also maybe less so the story of you're American and the fact that you're free is why they attacked you. They wanted to take you, they were jealous of the fact that you have freedom. And so they attacked us. And now we have to attack them. And we have to continue the work of sending our military to go do wars so that we can give other people freedom. That was the story that had been told, and I started to realize something's wrong with this story when we said, these are the enemies over here. And then we said, actually, those are the enemies over there, and they have weapons of mass destruction. So we're going to use all of the stuff that we were prepared for this war. We're just going to do it over here instead. And we weren't targeting the people that were connected to 9/11. It was just like, basically, we swapped out, folks of Arab descent and Muslims. We just transferred it. It was like, oh, we can't get that brown person, so we'll get these brown people instead. And they're all the same. Like, that was kind of the vibe that was going on. And it seemed like the story that was being spun to get us into all these wars. And then we went to the Afghan war. Like, it was all this war in this area was on our doing. And we were told for so long it was because they were jealous of our freedom and that we were trying to liberate those areas and basically make them more like America. There's some truth to making them more like America, maybe. But that was what I had believed reluctantly for so long. Now I don't believe any of that at all. And I see the conquests that our country is engaged in militarily as a continuation of the same energy that brought our Black asses here in the first place to this continent. I see it as a continuation of why the Indigenous folks in Australia speak English. I see it as a continuation of why Native people, Indigenous people on this continent and this hemisphere are Catholic and, Christian and Catholic in South America, religiously devout, why they've been decimated in North America. And I see it as a continuation of all that. I see it as a continuation of what was going on in the apartheid that was happening in South Africa. I see all these things, this sort of Western culture as, you know, European hegemony that was transferred to the Americas, control over and the ability to dominate other cultures and other people for the sake of extracting resources and labor to help what would have been a monarch. And the monarchy had colonies around the world, the British colonies, and thought they were going to do the same thing with what we now know as America. But the people who they sent to go become colonizers said, there's all this land is so rich and there's all this stuff, let's just take it for ourselves. And that's why we cut off the ties between us and Britain in that regard. And I never really realized that all those times when I was going to Puerto Rico, I was visiting a place that was in the process, that was a failed process of the same thing. And there was a huge uprising in Puerto Rico trying to resist being colonized and overtaken and controlled in this way. And it didn't quite succeed. They crippled Puerto Rico's agriculture and industry, and they crippled Puerto Rico, turned it into a sugar island for the sake of exporting sugar. And they were working for like less than $1 an hour. Not to get into a history lesson, but I see these things are all connected. And so we are free in our country today to purchase goods, to go to work to earn money so that we can give that money willingly by purchasing goods that keep us satisfied, while that money goes to do things that we might not agree with sending our money to go and do.
Oh no, for sure. And obviously we kind of get a say in what we do with our money, but we really don't because
One last sentence. So if we speak out against those things, then we don't feel like we're not free. And that's when so yes, I feel free as long as we're with the program. But if we speak out against those things, then we're not free. If we resist the effort that we against any of the wars that our country is involved in and has been involved in after a certain period of time, when it wasn't happening on our land here, on this land here, I won't say our land, on this land, speaking out against the Iraq war, the Afghanistan war, that actually also got people blacklisted, you know.
it happened to the Dixie. It happened to the
It
chicks.
happened in Vietnam. And being anti-war is not a good thing in America, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think that we have the illusion of freedom. So it's kind of like
That quote.
when you think about God. God's like, you can do whatever you want to do. You literally have free
But
will.
here's his 10 commandments.
You can literally say what you want. You
You have
can
free
do what
will.
you want. You have free will. You can eat what you
That's
want.
different than freedom.
You can kill who you want. You are free to do those things. Anyway, that being said, if you do things I don't like, you're gonna go to hell forever. Now, I'm not saying you can't do it. You literally can.
You could do it.
But I'm just saying, if you do, something really bad is going to happen to you. When I say really bad, it is going to be the worst thing that ever happened, and it will literally never stop happening. And I don't mean for the rest of your life. I mean until beyond the end of time. That will be your consequence. So yeah, do what you want to do. Feel free. So the question is that person really free? Do you really have free will? If the consequences of engaging in free will in a way that the person who's giving it to you doesn't like it, is that really free will? Are you truly free? Do you actually have freedom? And for me, the answer is no. You don't. I mean, you can't even live off the grid and have freedom. You know what I mean? But obviously, that being said, we have lots of that's why I think to be a revolutionary is probably the scariest thing there is to ever do. And
It
I think
really
that
is.
in our minds,
I do want to, on the Puerto Rican thing, I would love people to go and research about, because, you know, Puerto Rico is an American, I mean, it's a colony, but we don't call it that
Call it a
anymore. We call it
commonwealth.
a territory, you know. Uh, and what we've done to Puerto Rico and Puerto Rican folks, what our country, what our government has done was hidden from us, you know. And it probably around the same time in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, when we were thinking, we had certain notions about people who were Puerto Rican and Puerto Rican folks, that we were sort of looking another direction instead of what our government was actually doing on the island of Puerto Rico. And kind of similarly to what France did to Haiti. And so what I would love people to do is go in and research. There's tons of like really, really short documentaries on the history of Puerto Rico in relation to the United States. And you'd be surprised.
I mean,
And
not just
this is
Puerto
stuff that
Rico,
happened in our lifetime.
not just Puerto Rico, in Hawaii, in Georgia, Mississippi, Alabama,
Yeah, it ain't much
Arizona,
different.
Manhattan, literally all across, literally from sea to shining sea. So in our quest to find freedom, I think this might be the most from a scholastic standpoint, the most accolades we've ever had on the show. Everyone, can I get a doctor? Is there a doctor in the house? Yes,
We got
everyone.
doctors. We got doctors galore
Doctors on
up in
doctors
here.
on doctors, and I've been meaning to ask you if you can check out this crick in my neck. Oh, not those doctors. Never mind. Okay, different doctors, different doctors. Let's look into who our first doctor
Yes, let
is. Who's
me
gonna help us
intro
out?
them. I'm excited.
Mhm.
Dr. Nia Nickerson is a Black queer woman from Prince George County, Maryland. Hello, that's where I go for I'm partially from PG County, Maryland as well. And she holds a doctorate in education and psychology from the University of Michigan. Her work focuses on Black children's brain and language development, and with an emphasis on how its development influences reading success. Dr. Nickerson breaks down the resource inequities in education and the dangers of omitting the realities of slavery in curricula. Whew.
My name is Dr. Nia Nickerson. I have a PhD in education and psychology, and I primarily focus on Black children and Brown children's development in studying brain development, language development, and how the unique cultural circumstances of Black and Brown children influence those developments and how eventually it impacts their reading success and educational outcomes. So, first, the way that I think of chattel slavery is literally people being enslaved. I think of just the historical things that we think about with Black people being enslaved for no pay for 400 plus years, right? Or probably even longer than that if we really had real historical context. But there are many, many, many lasting implications of what it means to live in a country that was really built off the back of this slavery and this really abuse of people that looked a certain kind of way. And even 400 years out, we're still seeing some lasting implications of that for the lived experiences of young kids and Black and Brown people throughout all of education, right? This is not just K through 12. This is before K and even after 12. Like, we're still seeing really just the ramifications of what it means to have gone years and years and years not being educated and having, or formally educated, I should say, because we come from a long line of people that educated themselves through and through in Africa. We know that there's a lot of historical context that shows us that they were educated, just not in the way that we were educated here through formal schooling and such. But having such a difference in who received formal schooling for hundreds and hundreds of years continues to place us at a disadvantage, which is why we have things like affirmative action and things of that sort. I am a product of all public schooling through and through, still work for a public university. Public schooling is funded essentially from property tax, right? Like that is something that really contributes a lot to how schools are funded and if we're thinking about counties and that sort. And I think the divide comes in when we really start looking at just the socio-economical economic differences across the US, right? In terms of different properties, in terms of the amount of people in certain areas, the amount of education in certain areas that people have, and the way that the money is allocated, even the property tax money, I think is when we really start to see that division in what it's looking like for certain areas to be funded and certain other areas not to be funded as well. The people who have held property have really been able to pass down that property for hundreds of years has historically primarily been white people, white men to be specific. There is a long standing history of white men power being rooted in physical space, right? Land, which is why we do a lot of land acknowledgments now because it's been taken over and it's been built up on and it's been given down generation after generation after generation. And unfortunately, it does not provide opportunity for other people to get property, right, in these certain areas. And then there's just a monopoly. And then overtaking other areas, right, where people of color have historically been. So a long-standing history of white men really having ownership over a lot of property. And not only that, they also have power over how the property tax and that money is being allocated. So I just spent 6 years living in Michigan. I'm originally not from Michigan. I'm from the East Coast, right outside of DC. So a very diverse area. I would say definitely diverse also racially, ethnically, and socioeconomically. Michigan, also diverse, not as much. And so I was based out of Ann Arbor, but I had a lot of community in Detroit. And so we know Detroit is very Black. It is very rooted in culture. And unfortunately, I feel like in America, oftentimes that's synonymous with being under resourced. And so working in predominantly in Ann Arbor and also working in Detroit and working in the middle was actually where I really started to see like, man, this is very staunchly different from what's going on in Ann Arbor, where I would describe it as run by white people, a lot of money, right? A lot of people that are university affiliated, people that have the resources and are paying for these properties, and the city cares about it, right? So the schools, you don't have to want for anything. The students aren't wanting for anything. Teachers are feeling appreciated. Teachers are excited to be there. Diverse kind of schools, but predominantly white schools. And the students are well taken care of. I started working in a city not too far from Ann Arbor, where unfortunately a lot of marginalized communities have been pushed out to. School very visibly not as well resourced. And we're talking simple things like quality of books, right? Like it's not as bad, unfortunately, as I saw in Detroit, but even moving 15, 20 minutes away from a predominantly white school district to one that has more Latinx, more Black students, even more, Arab students, like just fewer computers, fewer iPads, books that, have been used and used and used for years, but still lively. The kids still happy and such. Detroit, completely different situation. And in the pandemic is when it became really clear to me that there were some serious differences in resources. In Ann Arbor, I'm hearing about kids. Okay, everyone get your iPad. All right, Susie's going up to the school, getting the iPad, going home. They're picking up food on the way home. Great, they're good to go. Detroit, I had a friend who was a kindergarten and first grade teacher during the 2 years of the pandemic when it was really serious. And the simple steps of even getting the children the laptops, right? One, they had to make sure there were enough laptops. Two, some parents are not able to get to that school in the snow to get those laptops. So baby's not getting the laptop, but she could use my phone to get on class. But we know that's not the same, right, as being on a laptop. And so In terms of resources, very different. But I think even in terms of what teachers are asked to do, called to do to provide those resources, we see some very serious differences. And a lot of it has to do with that residential property tax, even city status, right? Like some people, I'm not going to say Detroit is a forgotten city, but it's not as well taken care of as in Ann Arbor. When you start heading towards Ann Arbor, you see the streets get better. You see more lights on and things of that sort. So I'm surrounded by a lot of people in the education field that I think we are pushing for these things, right? We are really pushing to help equity, pushing in diversity, equity, and real inclusion, right? Like these are the reasons why we're in this space. And so I want to be hopeful and say, like, yeah, we can do this. Like, here's some steps for how we can do this. However, like we've talked about a little bit in this episode already, you know, there's a long-standing hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years of it not being the case. And I think that the pushback of that and how it really actualizes when you see people really advocating for kids of color, it becomes very obvious that this is a really serious uphill battle. It's a very serious uphill battle that taps into so many different zones that I don't think that we had even previously considered to be so serious. You know, I never thought there would be a question of, are we going to talk about basic historical facts like slavery, right? Why is that optional? This is something that occurred. There's no question about it. And yet and still we find ourselves here in 2024 in a place where people are like, don't teach that. And so I'm hopeful that there's steps that we can take, even with the work that I do in really legitimizing Black language and bringing that to the forefront. Like, this is a skill. I think that, you know, it's going to be a lifelong uphill journey for us to really start shifting these things in the right direction and getting the leadership that will allow for top-down things to occur that really start to, you know, facilitate some change. But right now, I can say this day today in 2024, I'm keeping on to my hope just because that's how my heart is built. But realistically, we have a long way to go. I haven't really been in a like classroom, honestly, in about a year and a half, maybe even a little more than that. But I do have a 9-year-old niece who is in school. And this is also, I think, really relevant when we think about the different regions, right? She's going to school in DC, a very Black school, and they're teaching everything. They're teaching everything. And I know this is not the norm. Like presentations for Black History Month were like, yes, bring your parents. We are going through everything. I mean, Kunta Kinte references literally in there, right? And like, this is also the area where I'm from. So I'm like, yeah, we are real lickety Black. But I know that like, if we think about Texas and Florida, baby, I don't know what's being taught, right? Like, I don't even know if those books are being brought into the schools. And for my teaching experience, the past 2 years has been undergraduate students and master students. And so some of my master students were coming off of just having taught during the pandemic, and they taught a range of people. But I've been really lucky to be around a lot of people who are like, we're teaching the facts. And so I can't really say that I know too much about the other side, as I really am venturing more into the academia space with people who've been here a lot longer. I'm getting exposed to it slowly. But I can say I know that there's still some really committed educators out there who are just not going to stand by and let people be mistaught. So even if the books don't have it, for instance, we have a lot more resources now as teachers and educators and just as people that I know people are getting creative and making sure that their students know the reality. I love freedom dreaming. I should just say that. It's one of my favorite things. Freedom dreaming in a sense of just like, if nothing else, you know, if you're thinking of nothing else, what would it be for you? And so I think about this. I'm not gonna say I have a perfect answer, but I think about this all the time. When I think about freedom, I think about being able to exhale, knowing that you'll be able to like inhale again without struggle. That makes sense. Like a real breathing motion where this counts, and I'm going to be able to have another one that also counts and that is also filling. And so I say that like thinking about existing, loving, supporting one another. Like when I think of freedom, I think of expression, I think of creativity, I think of not being bound. And unfortunately, I'm feeling like we're getting more and more bound, like more and more just restricted. I think of being able to fly, able to paint, to see the colors, to smell the flowers. I know I'm like just describing a whole bunch. I'm just being really descriptive, but when I think of freedom, I think of that. I think of running around, being silly, laughing, smiling. A world where really we can breathe. I think that's the first way I described it is the most clear way I can describe how I think about it. Just like that release, knowing like there's another one and it might even be better. Like, and I'm going to just take it in and live for what it's worth, I will say, I just actually got a new tattoo when I was finished. You're not going to be able to see it, but it's a Black Panther. Here, you can see it a little bit. I have a Black Panther in a flower, and it has some letters around it that says FMT. Letters stand for more than just you. And I just got it maybe about a year ago when I was finishing up my dissertation. I'm really down and out, like, gotta do this. My whole life, my parents have been extremely pro-Black, not quietly pro-Black, real bad, real loud pro-Black, where my name is the fifth day of Kwanzaa. My brother's name is Malik Mandela. This is very serious. It's very deep for my parents. And I think we were just socialized in a way that we knew we're here for more than just us. And part of that is paying homage to our ancestors, but part of that is also continuing to push us forward. I think there's also, balance, right? And being here for ancestors, pushing things forward, but also taking care of yourself. And I think I'm a happy balance between the two, but my motivation really right now and throughout grad school just became, and it sounds crazy to say, several things, but one, I don't want no white person doing what I'm doing. I don't want no white person asking the questions I'm asking, trying to study these Black kids in a way that I know I could do, and I could do it better. And I can go and talk to them and talk to their families and really give you the real deal, not no watered down version. Oh, this is going to get my research funded. Like, I want to give you the real deal of this is what it is. So one, I guess is my ego where I was like, nobody's going to do it better than me. Two, I love Black people and I love Black kids. I love Black kids so bad. It makes me sick. I love Black children. Part of it is because I was a Black child. If I have kids, they will be Black kids. I love Black people. And when I think of what was going to energize me throughout life, and I mean, none of us were made to work, but if I must work, I'm going to do something for somebody I love. And I love Black kids. I love seeing Black kids learn. I love seeing Black kids discover. I even love seeing Black kids fail because, baby, we going to dust your shoulders off, pick it up, try it again. Just like Aaliyah said, come on. Like, I love it. And it keeps me going, even in really dark times. The night of the election, actually, I went to a bonfire at a friend's house and I was ready to commiserate in sadness, baby. Somebody brought their kids over there. I'm like, who brought their kids? Kids running around. But I tell you, they brought such a life in me and gave me such hope. Like, even just chit chat and talk about you big back. No, you big back. Like, baby, there's still laughter, right? There's still happiness and there's still hope. And working for kids, working with kids, and making my life's work around what can I do to help the lived experiences of this youth? Like, that's what keeps me going. And really, it keeps me up at night. It keeps me going. And it irritates me sometimes too. All in the same. Ignorance, we've all heard ignorance is bliss. Ignorance also leads way for manipulation, for, I'm thinking of so many things. I'm trying to put it into like appropriate wording, but with that ignorance, with that not knowing, give someone else the power to control. It is as simple as that. And so by not formally educating, right? So it's interesting when we think about chattel slavery and we think about education, because there was a type of education given. There was religious education given. And that religious education gave way for more control, right? You don't have the intellectual breakdown of education that maybe formal education will provide you. But then you're getting this other education in things that you believe are moral, and they're telling you this is how you have to be because God is going to do this for you if you act good. Massa only whipped me 5 times today because I prayed. Yesterday he whipped me 10 and I didn't pray, right? So like this manipulation and this control that comes from not weaponizing people with a formal education. I'm not going to teach you really how to read on your own. I'm not going to teach you how to break down these math concepts and things like that, because I don't want you to be able to think too much on your own when you go back to your little hut at night. But I'm going to teach you how to pray to this person that we're both praying to, and you're just on the short end of the stick right now. But if you keep praying, so it provided a way for control. It provided a way for emotional, psychological, all these different types of abuses that allowed it to be as pervasive as it is. And unfortunately, we still see a lot of those pervasive effects right till this day in the way that people are manipulated and led to believe certain things that maybe don't have certain formal educations, but have other educations. And so very intentional. And unfortunately, we are just now regaining, I wouldn't even say we're relearning how to be intellects in a certain sense. If you get what I'm saying, that was taken away for so many years and other things were prioritized some of our ancestors didn't even know. Maybe they knew we can be thinking deeper, but they had other priorities. But, very intentional, super, super intentional. Slavery still plays a role because there's still very, very real racism. Racism is embedded, is woven into the very thread of this country. And so, unfortunately, we, even down to our genes, we still have genes that can be traced back to people not even too long ago that were slaves, which is crazy. It's only a few generations removed. So one, in our blood, we have this trauma. So I don't like the author of the book, The Body Holds the Trauma, because he's problematic, but there's really a lot of truth in that title. I have another recommendation called My Grandma's Hands that is more, I think, with people of color to really reflect on the generational impacts of it. But immediately, that's one thing that comes to mind is our bodies are still holding that trauma. And no matter what, we say or do, of course, we can live in wellness and live in health, but it's embedded in us because we are made of the people who came before us and they lived through. So one, it impacts us already. Two, the way that these systems are set up in the US have capitalized off of the hierarchical differences between Black and white people. And so if we think about slavery, we were already at the bottom of the totem pole. They gave us rights, set us free. Okay, we're inching our way up. But as we're inching our way up, so are they. And so that's how I think of it. Black people are continuously playing this game of catch up. And you can't catch up if you taking 2 steps and they keep taking 10. Okay, it's just, you just going to have to keep going and going and going and going. And I think that's just, since slavery ended, that's the game that we've been playing. And there's some Black people who don't believe that. I know that there's some Black people who are like, American dream, we can do this, do whatever. But the fact of the matter is, slavery was one of the things that made racism I don't even know how I want to say it, but indefinitely present. Like slavery was one of those things that just embedded it's the difference in people believing that there's some type of difference based on people's skin color. I don't think is ever going to lead the human race. It's never going to leave humanity. And I think slavery was one of those things that really made that extremely evident. And one of the things that it has lasting impacts because they're never going to be seen no matter what, right? I don't know. I can't see a world where someone's skin color doesn't matter. And that's really unfortunate to say, but it does, and it's going to, and it has impacted our everyday lives, unfortunately. So slavery slavery still has very real impacts for how we live our lives, how we take care of each other, the opportunities that we have. I think even, you know, in how we are in community with one another, especially in moments of trauma. Now, there's ignorance that can, lead to submissiveness, lead to, good manipulation, whatever the case may be. But the other side of it is the ignorance and believing that this is not real and this didn't happen, so I can behave in this kind of way. And I unfortunately think that removal is going to lead way for some of that. It's also going to empower some people who know that it was real, know that it, should be talking about. But now that they've taken it out, it's going to empower more people, I think, to choose which histories happened. And I think that that's crazy. And so, as scary and dangerous as it is, I think that it also has the power to continue empowering people that don't need to be empowered anymore. You know what I'm saying? That do not need to be empowered in omitting the historical facts that really help give way and give, even though evidence shouldn't be necessary for real equity and inclusivity and loving one another, but removing such a real fact that has such serious implications for lived people is a crazy ploy, and I'm sad to see it it really making its way downtown. It's really disheartening. I'll just talk a little bit about my work if anyone is interested in knowing a little bit more about me. So I study essentially how Black children who grow up around Black people who are speaking Black English, I study what's going on in their brains. So what does their brain look like when it's processing talking to another Black person? And what's going on when it's processing speaking to a white person? And what's going on in their brains when they're in situations when they have to process both at the same time, like our everyday lives when we're code switching. And I basically take that information and try to understand how this impacts learning how to read. Because the words we see on the page are often the words that we hear from the white people. But what does it mean to learn how to read in a language that's kind of different from the language that we speak at home? And so that's generally what my main work is about. I also have other work that is addressing the racism that's embedded in neuroscience. And that's a whole nother conversation, but that is a really huge part of my work as well. I've illustrated a few kids' books and great, very fun experience. And I paint, and that's me. And so if anyone wants to reach out about anything, happy to chat. Anything education, psychology, neuroscience, linguistics, even just chat. I'm a chatter, so.
I actually, not that I'm aligning myself to Dr. Nickerson, but I went to school for education. I studied education, theater education in college. I did not graduate college. I don't even have a bachelor's. But I have so much respect for people who work in education and who are, interested in the learning process. I am not a good student. I am a historically bad student. I have never been good at school. Never, not once in my life have I enjoyed schooling. Do you like schooling?
I I don't really know, but I mean, I don't want to go back to school necessarily, but I definitely have a different feeling about school than I did when I was younger. But to speak a little bit on, the subject of freedom and education, obviously, all we have to do is look throughout history and see like the people that people that were being subjugated, the perpetrators of that subjugation would withhold information, knowledge. Knowledge is power,
Power is
and
freedom.
education from people not wanting to have the ability to not only read and write, not only to keep them from reading and writing, but also to erasing their own stories from their knowledge, erasing sort of who they are, which I guess allows people to inject a new identity. You weren't kings and queens in Africa. You are slaves, born to be slaves. God says you're supposed to be slaves. And the I know that we had slavery in our country, but I never thought of it as a genocide and an apartheid. And I never thought of it that way. I thought of it as like, oh, there were slaves hundreds of years ago, and that's it.
Well,
And
it
they
was
just,
taught very differently. There's a famous story about this school out here in California where a bunch of students from a black school went to go see Schindler's List, and because they were high school kids, they were uncomfortable with what they saw, and then at one point they laughed during the film because they were children watching something that made them very uncomfortable, and sometimes people laugh when they're uncomfortable, especially when they're surrounded by other students. And then there were some theater goers who were like, "There's a bunch of anti-Semitic black kids at this school." And it became national news. It became such a big deal that
but this was recently, right?
it was such a big deal that Arnold Schwarzenegger, I mean, it was when Schindler's came out. It was when Schindler's List came out.
Oh, back then.
Um,
Okay.
Arnold Schwarzenegger had to come to the school and be like, "Hey, Steven Spielberg came to the school." It became that much of a big kerfuffle with these students being told that they're like anti-Semitic. And then during the conversation, one of the kids stood up to Steven Spielberg and said, "Well, when are you going to make a movie about the black genocide?" And then a few years later, Amistad came out.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really directed by Steven Spielberg, and I really recommend you all. I mean, I cannot remember. Maybe our producer can find the episode. There's an episode on this of This American Life that is specifically about this experience of these kids being villainized for their behavior at the school, and having it become such national news. But it was interesting that you mentioned that, because even in that moment, that kid and Steven Spielberg acknowledged that it is a genocide, and that's when the movie Amistad was.
I
Then
mean, and that's the piece that we never, of course, we were never taught about it in that way. And I mean, is that why so many folks, when you hear, the response to a lot of people, response to the teaching of the history of slavery or things like that in our country, the response is, well, I never had slaves and it wasn't a big deal and it was 100 years ago, so you should be over it, since we didn't even teach it in a way that gives reverence to the impact that it really had, then maybe that's part of the reason why people are so easily able to dismiss it and make it and downplay it. Maybe.
I'm curious to find out how it was taught to you all in Pennsylvania, because when I was taught about it in Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, it was taught it was like they were like, it was gruesome, it was brutal, it was vicious, it was nasty, it was horrible. But also, I lived in the South, so we probably had a very different learning of it, and we not only learned about it in American history, but we also had to take Georgia history too. So when we do, and I think a lot of states do their own history. So when you do Georgia history, you learn about it again, because obviously Georgia has a history
Maybe
of
they
slavery.
do. I don't really know. I mean, I'm sure that like there was a special mention. I didn't go to school in Pennsylvania. I'm from Pennsylvania, but I didn't go to school in Pennsylvania. We didn't get a very special moment about slavery. I think we learned about people who were slaves. We learned about Harriet Tubman. And I just found out she was going to be in concert.
By the way, I would like to remind you all, you can go get my book, Harriet Tubman Live in Concert. You can pre-order it right now. You can go to readthedragqueen.com and you can get my book. It is a historical fiction piece. So this is not a true story. This is historical fiction. It takes place today.
Mhm.
It is about Harriet Tubman coming back to life and writing a hip hop album. This is not a sad slave book. If you if you are sick of, I mean, not sick of reading, but like if you can't take another Precious or Color Purple or 12 Years a Slave,
Ooh.
or if you can't take another
Well, even if you can and want to switch
But I'm
modes.
saying, but if you're someone who's like, I can't read another Black trauma piece, this is not a Black
Okay.
trauma piece. This is about Harriet Tubman writing a hip hop album.
Wonderful.
It is an absurd, comedic book that is done with a lot of reverence for Harriet Tubman. So you can go to readthedragqueen.com and pre-order my book today.
Okay, so that's all we learned about. And so we did not, to answer your question, no, we didn't get a very in-depth, gruesome telling of it. I think that most places, I think that a lot, I don't think I'm an outlier in the whitewashing of learning about it in a whitewashed way. I think that was certainly a trend that was starting, and it's definitely the norm now. Which is why, notions of critical race theory were starting to become implemented and being pushed back against so staunchly. But
Did you all
the
have to see the images?
w-
Like when I was in school, there was
no,
every Black person
mm-mm.
saw lynching images. We all saw them. Everyone saw the images of the man with his back that was completely brutalized by the whips. Did you ever see that image? I saw it
I've seen
every
that image. Yeah,
year.
yeah, yeah. I've seen that
No,
as
I
an
mean,
adult. I
I saw
didn't
it
see it. I
every
didn't
year
see it in
from
like third grade
kindergarten
or
until
anything
I
like that.
graduated. I saw
Mm-mm.
it every single February. This image was
You
rolled
you
out.
had a really interesting time, because I think that you're one of the only groups of folks that did that, because I really do think that most people did not see that image until they were adults.
Now let's welcome back to our podcast Dr. Jonathan P. Higgins, or Dr. Jon Paul. They are an American award-winning educator, journalist, and creator of the Webby-nominated Black Fat Film podcast, featured in Essence and Entertainment Weekly. They consult for top brands and advocate for Black, queer, and non-binary liberation. Their debut book, Black Fat Femme, releases in April of 2025. Dr. Jon Paul educates us on the far-reaching economic effects of chattel slavery. Let's hear from Dr. Jonathan P. Higgins.
My name is Jon, also known as Dr. Jon Paul. I am, outside of the podcast, I am getting ready to release a book. My book is March 25th, 2025, for folks who are listening and are interested. Black Fat Femme, Revealing the Power of Visibly Queer Voices in Media and Learning to Love Yourself, is available for pre-order everywhere. And so really excited to push that book and, do a whole bunch of things and happy things behind it. And yeah, just doing a lot of, background work as I do in terms of consulting, working with orgs to make sure that we uplift the voices of marginalized people in the right way, considering all that is going on in the world. Yep. And still speaking and still, throwing shade at Elon and all the people who support him. So I did have a cruise this week, did the Mexican Riviera cruise, and we had a little bit of a moment trying to get off the boat, where I lovingly screamed to freedom once I got off the boat. Because if the ancestors was kicking up in my spirit, being stuck on a boat around white people, it was just too much. And so mother had to scream to freedom getting off the boat. But yes, it was relaxing. The time on the boat was relaxing, but getting off the boat was a little bit of a to-do. When talking about the history, when talking about kind of the financial gains, right? We have to really understand how white supremacy worked, right, in terms of the institution of slavery. And some notes that I had took, just kind of doing my own research. It's, one of the notes that I found very interesting in talking about kind of so we always kind of have to, and we say this in so many different ways, follow the money, right? So when we think about white supremacy, and even thinking about how it functions now, there's always been this very large realm of capitalism that has been around it, right? And so when we talk about chattel slavery, by 1860, let me be correct, by 1860, nearly 4 million American slaves were worth $3.5 billion. So just imagine how many more slaves were worth that, right? That is the number. I want to repeat that. By 1860, nearly 4 million American slaves were worth $3.5 billion. So it was never about us. It was never about our worth in terms of being people. Because and that's the thing I struggle with, right? When we hear the notion of the American Constitution saying all men were created equal. No, they weren't, because there was a higher price on our head, right? There was a higher amount of money that we were worth. And so that's the thing that makes it very hard. So when we start talking about chattel slavery, not only is it about the money, but what we're talking about too is that this was the largest single financial asset in the entire U.S. economy. There was nothing making this, not even liquor. And liquor was a high number. There was nothing making more money than chattel slavery in America in 1860. And let's keep in mind, that was in 1860. Slavery started here in 1619. So how much money was made between the first slave who was taken off the ship and that 1860 figure? That's the thing I think people kind of don't really talk about, is that this was a major money-making machine. And so then you have was it 1876? So you have 16 years later, somebody says you can't have slaves anymore. Slavery is abolished. We want to get rid of it. The reason why people hold on to the hostility and the racism that they do towards us was because we were their human capital. We were the reason that were making them rich. So it's a very interesting thing. Like when we boil it all down, yes, white supremacy, yes, all of the other figures, but what it really came down to was the abolishment of slavery threw a wrench into the money system, the money machine. Well, I mean, if you really think about it, from the 17th to the 19th century, 12.5 million enslaved Americans were brought over here, right? But a lot of them went through British colonies. So this money was moving from British places, from people in power over in Great Britain, and all of these different things. And so when we really think about kind of this idea, and that's the thing I think we have to keep in mind. You know, I have not done enough of my own research to be able to sit down and say, okay, well, because I know people quickly will always go to, well, you know, white people were enslaved too. Okay, yes. But the figures weren't as big for those people, right? When we have that, like, it was Black people where the worth was. And so when we start talking about who had power and who had access and who was able to kind of move this, like keep the system moving, a lot of it started in Britain. And it was European countries that were, you know, basically pimping us out. And that's really the only way, you know, the only way I can justify it in my head was they were our pimps. They basically went to Africa and said, you need to give up your liberties and your freedom and your livelihood to come work in America. And we're going to sell you to do that. Right. And so I think that's like, if we really want to take it down to a way that it's more digestible, it was that. It was very much we were forced against, you know, we were human trafficked. We were human trafficked. And I think that's the thing that folks don't really talk about, right? We talk about enslavement, but we don't talk about the human trafficking piece of it all, and how much, and even now, I think that's the other part of it, right? And I hate to get away from the chattel slavery conversation, but we have to talk about how this is systemic and how this is built into kind of the culture and the fabric of America, right? When we look at human trafficking now, how much money is it still in human trafficking, and how much money we see, you know, and again, I don't know if I'm gonna get in trouble for saying it, but when we think about Diddy, right? When we think about Diddy and we think about the cases that he has and all this stuff, Epstein and all that, right? It was the same formation. It was the same concept. There's a lot of money in trafficking people, and it started in these British colonies as a way for them to not only build up their capital, but also to, you know, build up whatever the US wanted to build up too. So when we talk about what they've built, when we talk about what enslaved people were doing, specifically enslaved Black people, and I have to name that. I always want to make sure I make that very clear, because again, people will always try to divert this conversation and say, well, what about the Jewish people? And what? No, girl, we're talking about Black people here. it was predominantly the South. Everything that we know of in the South was predominantly built out. I mean, we had railroads. They were being punished and having to pick cotton, sugar, and tobacco fields, and tobacco. And I how do I say this? I'm pausing because I'm like, I'm trying to be as I'm in my feelings about a thought that I have, and I'm trying to collect myself before I provide that thought. I should have. So in 2016, the thing about James Baldwin said, when knowing what you know, you're always in a constant state of rage. I'm in that moment of rage because I didn't know what I know now then. And in 2016, me and my partner went to Louisiana. I'm going to tell the story and then I'm going to get back to my point. We went to Louisiana and my husband was very, very adamant about wanting to go to plantations, specifically plantations that had Black people. So that way he could, understand the system better. Right. And we went to a sugar plantation. And the woman at the sugar plantation was trying to sell it to us as if it was just a monopoly and a way for her family and her company's family to make money. And I'm like, if I knew then what I know now, I would have slapped the shit out of that lady, because the way she was she was a white woman. She was trying to pass it off to me as if it was just my family who had this sugar plantation and we've helped America become what it is in terms of sugar. And I'm like, no, girl, your family benefited off of having a whole bunch of Black people and you're not talking about that at this plantation. So I think that's where my inner rage in that moment came from, of like, I should have went off, but I didn't, because I didn't know. And I think that's the same thing for a lot of people that, yes, we had the Civil War and there were all of these things that were happening in Mississippi. But what a lot of people don't know is that the Civil War was over that. It was over money. It was over these white people basically trying to do what they could to retain the slaves that they wanted to retain. And so there were fights over cotton and sugar and tobacco. And a lot of that, again, was us. We were the ones out in the fields. We were the ones basically being pushed to do a lot of this stuff in terms of southern cropping, sharecropping, and really investing in a lot of these southern enterprises that were really utilizing us as the backs of building up the capital for these white people. We were building their homes. We were taking care of their children. And that's where I think we have to talk about it, right? There have been so many scholars that have really dived into this, the mammification of Black women, right? And that, I will say this, right? It's a part of the reality. Like when Kamala didn't win, there was a part of me that was like, fuck. But there was also a part of me that was like, good. I'm glad she didn't win, because I knew what this country was going to do to her. They were going to do exactly to Black women what they've always done to Black women, right? Well, it's your responsibility to fix this. And that started with slavery. It started with chattel slavery, with Black women raising these children who in turn were also being, excuse my language, was being abused and fucked and having to have children that they didn't want to have. Right. And so, I mean, we were never, from the time that we were, and like I said, knowing this is living in a constant state of rage, where you recognize that you have these people who take you and your history and your people. And I will say this too, like that was a part of my frustration with doing ancestry.com. I did it. And when I saw my lineage and I was seeing how people were scattered across the map, the only thing I can think of, my family was a part of the slave trade, right? Like that was literally it. When I started seeing all the dots and started seeing where my lineage came from, right? And how so much of my lineage was from Africa. Then it moved over to, I think for what was the other there? Basically, it made a circle around to me getting to the U.S. when I looked at where all the dots landed, and I said, "Oh, okay, that's what that was, right?" Like even though I didn't do that ancestry, kind of thing, I knew. And I think that's the thing for a lot of Black people. When they start looking at their lineage, they can see how the dots moved, and you can go, "Oh, okay, my people were a part of the slave trade." got it. And I think that's the thing that really kind of burns me in all of this, right? Is that people think it was just about the, being out in the field and cotton. No, it was way more than that. It was, we were the ones that were building the US to look the way that it was. And white people were the ones taking the credit for it and getting the money for it too. So this is something a lot of people don't know about me, and I haven't spent a lot of time talking about it, but my great grandmother was a slave. And when I say she was a slave, she was one of those, what I like to call just a general American slave. And, her time, quote unquote, started in the early 1900s. And I remember right before she died, I talked to her and I remember asking her, like, what was it like? And her telling me stories about what it was like being on the plantation and being in the house and having to do all of this work. And I think what hit me the hardest and what I live with day in and day out is the education of it all. My great grandmother couldn't read or write, right? And she learned very late in life how to read and how to write. And the thing I will always remember her saying to me when I was younger before she passed was, if I knew how to read or write, I probably would have been able to get free sooner. The thing was, she didn't know, right? So we have 1863 happen and Abraham Lincoln signs the Emancipation Proclamation, right? And then even down to like 1876, people were saying, oh, all of these things happened to help people get free. But a lot of them didn't know because they couldn't see anything to prove that they were free, right? And I think that's the thing that sits at the core of me when you ask this question, right? Of like, what could have been done different? There were and even now, I look at it now, right? Like we're in 2024, we're still dealing with a lot of the ramifications of what I saw a meme and someone had said, folks have been something to the avail of like, there's shorter time between how long America has existed than how long slavery has ended. Like we need to do the math around that. And I think that's the thing that sits in my stomach so much because it was like the same systems that are still keeping people like you and people like, Bob or anybody else, right, out of opportunities were set up during the slavery era. And they're still working. And so I think that's the thing when you ask the question, what do we need to change? I hate saying it this way, but like, I can only think of, there was an influencer who once said this, and I won't say her name, but she said they have to die. And what I mean by that is that we have to have these people who are 50, 60, 70 years old, 80 years old, going off to glory, that hold this idea that we are not equal to them because of slavery. They need to go meet their maker. Because right now what's happening is that there's still this systematic hold that keeps us from opportunity to liberate ourselves. And what I mean by that too, and I want to make that very clear. Now, when I say folks need to meet their maker, I'm not just talking about white people. I'm talking about black people too, because there are a lot of black people who uphold these systems as well, because they want to be the only black person in the room. They know how much money is being made around oppression, right? And so they buy into it. We saw it in North Carolina, right? During the presidential election. We saw it in Florida. When and again, I'm not going to name names, but what I'm saying is we're still seeing black people buy into the idea of whiteness and white supremacy. And so what happens is when people buy into these systems, they think, oh, it's going to liberate me and make my life easier. And I'm going, nah, girl, what you're doing is you're only keeping the system alive. By you upholding it, you're only perpetuating this 300-year, 400-year system that continues to keep telling people that black people don't deserve better than being enslaved. When old girl said we need a mamala, Drew Barrymore, when she said we need a mamala, my eyes got big. I said, oh my God, like, girl, what? Like, what is you doing? Like, that was literally my first response. I was like, what is she doing? But that's a direct echo, right? Because slavery, black women in slavery were I should say slave times, in times of slavery, black women were expected to raise and even down to like breastfeeding children, right? This whole idea of my home cannot be right unless I have a black woman in it. So now we're seeing that move off into this notion of black women can save us. That's a direct echo, right, of it. Even though Black women are right, and Black women are often very much smarter than what the world gives them credit for. I'm always listening to a Black woman. I was raised by one, right? I'm always listening to when a Black woman says something because I believe her. But I'm saying that is a direct echo of the way the world has always propped up Black women to, to be kind of the one to fix everything and to make everything better. The mammification of Black women, right? And there are books about that. I would also even say I have said this in my own in my own work. The whole concept of the binary is tied into echoes of slavery, right? I think about the ways that we look at Black men, specifically Black cis men, right? And this idea of over-masculating them, where they're strong and they have to do this and they have to do that because they're Black men. Well, baby, do you know that they were doing? You know that lives because they put Black men out in the field to work, right? So there's this echo of, well, Black men are stronger. No, Black men are not stronger. Black men have been taught that they have to be stronger because from the inception of time, we've always told Black men that they have to use their bodies as a means, right? I'll even say down to like the NBA and football. Let's talk about it, right? This idea that people are looking at Black bodies as just people on a field. We're looking at hello? Am nigga. Sorry. Come on now. These are Black men on a field, right? And they're running up and down, and people are betting on them. People have things that look at the endorsements, look at all of that, right? Yeah, we're giving them millions of dollars, but there's more money that you can trace to that $40 million that you're giving to that Black man who's running up and down a field, right? So, in the minute that they do something wrong, Colin Kaepernick, right? We discard them. They're not important anymore to us as a culture. So I would say, I always like to tell people, how do I say this? I think when you ask the question, what are the ways that slavery shows up in our day to day? Everything. And I hate to be that person because it's like, well, Dr. Higgins, why are you always so negative? No, I'm not negative. I think it's important that we're cognitive. Because if we are not, then we fall back into the system of keeping this system propped up. And I think a bigger part of it, I always like to tell people the reason why. Let's talk about it. Why do we think Trump is wanting to get rid of the educational system? If we do away with education, because who are the most educated at this point? The numbers don't lie. Black women are the most educated at this point, right? Black men shortly behind them. I have a doctorate. I say this all the time. It is not lost on me when people see Dr. Jonathan Higgins in front on a piece of paper or in front of the name, why I don't get hired, why I don't get invited into a room. Because that signifies I have more education than you. So that means I'm very much aware, not talking about it from an elitist standpoint. I'm talking about it from this idea of I did the thing that society told me that I couldn't do. With all of the ways that society has propped it up to keep me from liberation, right? So now you have to justify all of the stuff I know as a Black person who's highly educated. I can call you. I can gotcha you. I got you. I know what you're trying to do, girl. Right. And so that's the same thing with slavery. There's so much to unpack when we think about how easy it is to kind of pull. It's easy to fool people when they don't know the recipe. And I think that's the thing that chattel slavery's tried to do and is continuing to try to do even now in 2024. What is the resistance now? As easy as it is for me to sit back and kind of rub my hands together, who is that rapper that rubbed his hands together outside that music studio? There's a gif of him rubbing his hands together. I forget what his name is. Birdman. I could do my Birdman hand rub, right? I think about what's happening right now with Twitter versus Blue Sky, right? We're seeing a mass migration, especially of Black people leaving Twitter, going over to Blue Sky. And you're probably going, John, what's the point? What are you trying to make? How does that connect to resistance? Elon Musk made a lot of money off of buying Twitter, right? As much as he paid a lot of money to get it, I'm sure in the last 2 years he's made a lot of money. Now that Black people are saying, we're not going to use your platform, who gets content from Black people? Who gets to memify Black people, right? Who gets to create content in the voice of Black people? It's gonna be a little harder now, right? And I know people are going over blue sky, and you can say the same thing. Well, they're just going over blue sky, and people could no. What we're doing is now we're sticking it to the person who helped kind of create this mess. And I think that's what the resistance is, right? As much as I have had a hard time, not eating at McDonald's, have had a hard time not drinking my Starbucks, girl. That's the resistance, right? We have to kind of go back to these institutions of capitalism, and we as Black people have to say, this institution is harmful to us. This institution has continued to harm us. We are now removing ourselves from said institution, and also rest. And what I mean by that in terms of rest is when shit goes left and white people start coming us going, oh my God, what do we do? I don't have any answer for you, girl. I can't help you. I don't know what to tell you. Y'all got to figure that out on your own, right? That's the kind of stuff that I think is the true resistance, right? Is saying I'm going to only pour into myself, because I've made it very clear to my team. I'm only doing speaking engagements if Black people ask me. When white people come to me and say, hey, Dr. Higgins, we're doing this event. Can you? No, I'm not educating your people. Get somebody else to do it. Because that's resistance for me. And so I think what the true answer to that is reclaiming your time. True resistance is saying I'm reclaiming my time, and I'm only giving my energy, and I'm only giving my peace to the Black and the brown folks I know who truly deserve it. Because this whole country has stolen our time, has stolen our energy, has stolen our history. And even now in 2024, we don't really have a lot to prove or to say for it. So that's my answer to that. What motivated me to get to this place was knowing that education was the one thing that nobody could take away from me. And I'll be transparent also saying I didn't grow up thinking I was smart ever. I always thought I was stupid. And it started very early. I'm going to take y'all there. Remember Gate? Remember Gate? Gifted and talented, girl. Gifted. Yeah, it was gifted and talented education here in Southern California, right? If you got into Gate, you was that girl. I didn't get into Gate when I applied. And I thought I was stupid. And so for a very long time, I would tell myself that, well, you didn't get into Gate and all your cousins did. You're stupid. That's the reason why you didn't get in. And so I carried that with me for a very, very long time. And I talk about this in other facets of my writing and speaking and stuff. And I remember meeting a teacher in college who had said something to me, and I'll never forget him. But it also kind of correlates to this system that I now have kind of created for myself. I remember being in the classroom and this teacher looking over and saying, and make sure you put Jon in your group because he's one of the smartest people in this room. And that unlocked something for me. And I was like, oh, snap. It wasn't me. Like, as I got older and I started understanding, I said, oh, that's that systematic oppression that made you believe that you weren't smart, right? You were a Black kid trying to be smart and trying to be educated and trying to be all-knowing in a system, in a school district that didn't see it for Black kids, and they still don't. I grew up in San Bernardino County, and I don't know how much you all know about San Bernardino County, but it is a high number of Black and brown people in our county. However, we have the lowest per capita, right? Because there's a lot of Black and brown people in the city. So when you are a Black kid saying, I want to be smart and I want to use education to get up out of this hood, I want to do all of this, I'm not going to pick up no drugs, I'm not going to sell drugs, I'm not going to go to jail, right? You're saying something different to a world that's going, no, we school to prison pipeline, girl. That's what's supposed to happen to you. A lot of people don't know this. When I applied to go to college, let me tell you this. When I went to my 12th grade, so I actually had enough credits to graduate early because that's how much I loved school when I was in high school. I had 160 units more than any other student in my class. I went and said, can I graduate early and start community college? Because at the time, Valley had a community college program where you could start community college early. You know, my counselor told me, I don't think that you're college material. You should look into a trade. And I had 106. I had more units than any other student in my class. And so what makes me smart is going, or what makes me so kind of like I had to have education was, it was like, okay, y'all niggas can keep doubting me. Keep doubting me, please. I'm gonna show y'all that I can do it, and I'm gonna do it well. And so I think that's what has created Dr. Jon Paul. That's the book, that's the podcast, that's the brand, that's the. I know as a Black, fat, queer, non-binary person that people want to see. I tweeted, I posted this on Instagram last night. I know that there is somebody somewhere looking at me upset because I'm not suffering the way they want me to. And I'm out here on boats, in luxury rooms, girl. I drive a really nice car. I have a Lexus. Honey, when I hop out my 350H and I grab my little Louis Vuitton bag, I know I'm that bitch, right? And I know somebody somewhere. Look, happened to be. People think I'm lying when I tell these stories, but I'm so vigilant. I'm so aware. I was getting gas the other day, and I saw a white man look me up, and he saw, because I have Dr. Jon Paul on my my plate. I have a personalized plate that says Dr. Jon PL, and I saw him look at my plate. I saw him look at my car. I saw him look at me, and he rolled his eyes and got in his truck and drove away. That shit happens because people they don't want to see someone like me do okay. And that's what slavery is. The history of slavery is I own you. I own your worth. I own how you feel about you. That's what, when I say all systems of oppression are connected, that's where it started. And so I tell a lot of these stories, right? When you say, what's the connection between me and my grandmother would always tell me, baby, do better than me. My mama still says that I want my babies to do better than me. And I'm doing better. I just bought my mom a washer and dryer. Paid for it. Cash. Because she needed one. She was like, baby, I don't got the money. Mama, that does not matter. I'm taking care of you now. I'll pay your rent if you need me to. Right? But that's what I've worked for. I've worked for the liberation of me. I've worked for the liberation of my family. And I want to make sure that they know that they can have whatever that they want because of all of the work that I've done to liberate us. Freedom to me is knowing that you're making some white person's booty itch. When they see you, you know that they just uncomfortable because they not. Ugh. Like even having funny story on our cruise. I had on some Balenciaga shoes. And I want to make this clear. I am a label whore, and I don't equate success to all of the stuff I've owned. However, what I want people to know about me was, like I even just was texting a friend of mine who saw me on a podcast last week. I said, I live in a world now where I don't have to grocery shop at the 99-cent only store. I can buy whatever I want in a store. I can go wherever I want. I can do whatever I want because I got enough money in the bank to do that. I've worked very hard in these last 10 years. Freedom to me is being able to know that I get to tell people how much Dr. Jon Paul is worth. You want me to speak? This is my price. You want me to come work for your organization? Nope. That number that you got on that paper? Nah, girl, I'm worth more than that. That's freedom to me. Being able to tell people, but also too, having enough knowledge and having enough, I would say, mental health stamina. I've been to therapy. I've gotten the help I needed. Being able to tell people how to love me and how to treat me. I think that's what freedom looks like. Because I think because of slavery, it's kind of like, I'm liking it to this. I heard someone talking about this on one of the reality shows that I watch. I'm a reality show junkie. I watch 1,000 Pound Friends. And one of the girls who lost a lot of weight, she said, when I'm in a relationship, I struggle because I feel like I let men treat me the way that they used to treat me when I was fat. And I liken that to the story of a lot of Black people let the world treat them a certain type of way because throughout their whole entire life, the world has treated them a certain type of way, right? So you get used to it. You get used to being shitted on. You get used to people being terrible to you. You get used to walking into rooms and feeling like you have to shrink yourself. And when I walk into a room, I push my titties up and I say, nah, y'all gonna treat me the way I want you to treat me. Nope, that's Dr. John Higgins to you, sis. Right? That kind of stuff, right? That's what freedom is for me. Freedom is saying, I get to live this life the way I want to, and I'm not going to let no white person tell me, specifically white people, tell me how I can and can't live this life. I don't know if y'all know, but like in 2017, I basically got fired for basically talking about social justice issues online. And there was a moment where I was like, my life is over, my career is over, everything is good. People are never gonna hire me. And this week, Gabrielle Union endorsed my book. And I'm just like, bitch, y'all niggas thought y'all had me. And so this is just one of those moments that I'm sitting in and I'm going, my God is a good God to me. My God. Because white people really thought they had me back in 2017. And I'm sitting here pretty. And it's just nice. It feels good. So thank you for uplifting me. But I also want to be a beacon of light for other people, because I think so many of us feel like with what's coming our way that life is over and that, oh, we're living in fear. And I'm just walking around here going, y'all niggas can't touch me. Y'all can't touch me. Y'all can try, but you can't. I remember a specific time in my life where I hated being Black. I hated being queer. I hated being Black and queer. And it wasn't that I hated me. It was nobody had ever celebrated me. Nobody had ever celebrated the intersections of who I am. And so it told me that because nobody ever celebrated me or my intersections, that I couldn't celebrate me, right? And I think about that, right? When you talk about holding up chattel slavery, when we think about the schematics of it, right? I think there are a lot of people who are locked inside of themselves and they don't know how to find freedom because that's all they've ever known is to hide and to be afraid and to be scared and to hate who they are. And so they say, well, if I vote for Trump, like everybody else is doing, then I get approval from the people who supposedly hate me. And now I'm seen. Now I'm valued, right? Now that history that hangs over my head of feeling like I'm worth something, right? Even though we know that you're not, that it makes them feel validated. And so I think there's so many people who just don't know how to get free. They don't know how to get free. And I even have to fight that stuff, with me. And I know I've gotten a lot of crap. My husband's white. I met my husband back in 2010. And we've had this conversation. He's asked me before, he says, you do a lot of work around, and my husband is probably one of the wokest people that I know. My husband's more woke than me sometimes. I'll be looking at him like, well, damn, because my husband, he'll jump in front of me in a minute to, that's racist. That's problematic. Don't do that shit. Right. Like my husband's real good on that. But again, a lot of that is 14 years of having to love someone and have these tough conversations with them and help them understand that. Right. But I say all of that to say there's still elements of me where I'll look at a white man and I'm like, ooh, that's a white man. That's fine. And then I think to myself, is he really attractive? Or have you drank some of the Kool-Aid, girl? Right. So, while I love my husband, there's still an element of me that says this, and he probably feels this too. If this boat was to ever dock, I would never date another white person because I've done enough learning for me to understand what that was when I met my husband. I was looking for freedom through him. No shade to Jonathan, right? But what I'm saying is I know better now. And I don't have it in me to educate another white person the way I've educated this one. So, I think about that a lot. I just think a lot of us are very, and again, I want to make it very clear that if Jonathan ever hears this, I love him to the moon. But I've also loved him because of the person he's become, because of the work he's done on his own to become a better white person, right? And to see me in all of my Blackness and to celebrate my Blackness. But I think that there are a lot of Black people who think that they're going to find liberation through whiteness, and baby, you'll never find it. Even with, the white friends that I have that's like, I didn't vote for Trump. Okay, cool. You didn't vote for Trump. But what else, sis? What else? What are you doing to make sure everybody that's not you feels safe at your job? What are you doing to educate your family? Bitch, don't tell me. Go tell your family. We got Thanksgiving and Christmas coming up. Go have them hard conversations with your family, right? I agree. I truly agree. I'm very, 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 very weary is the right word. Leery might be the right word. I'm very leery of people who, even Black people, who tell me what type of activism they're doing, what type of freedom work they're doing. I don't need to hear it. And it's not to say that it's not important for you to tell me, right? If we get into conversations and we're having conversations about the work we're doing or the work we're trying to do, great, let's have that conversation, right? But I don't need you telling me that you are a safe person. Show me that you are a safe person. Those little blue wristbands that these white women are wearing, I don't care. Okay, sis. Okay. I didn't vote for him. I want you to know I'm safe. No, bitch, you are still benefiting from everything. And again, I'm not calling you a bitch. I'm just saying, bitch, you are still benefiting from everything that happens in the next 4 years. Even with your little blue wristband, you still will benefit. So I need to know what you are doing to dismantle this system. So that's kind of my take on it. And it's funny because I don't know where you all live, but I'm based in Southern California. And people love to perpetuate Southern California as this rainbow of joy and liberation. And, oh, I love to go to the Abbey Pink Pony Club. Okay, girl. Okay. You're down at the Pink Pony Club. But what else are you doing? I don't care. And it's not to say that we don't need white allies. We do. We need them. We need everybody at this point. All the people need to be in the room. But my thing is when you are so self-righteous to believe that you are a better white person because you didn't vote for Trump, that's where the problem lies. Because Trump still got elected a second time. So that means that there was some conversation that happened around you that you didn't stop. Here we are. The same way I told my husband, well, I'm not that kind of white person, so why are you saying that? Okay, you're not. But your mother is, and your aunt is, and your Uncle Charlie is. So them are the niggas you need to be talking to come November 28th when we have Thanksgiving dinner. Or when you are sitting in community with them. I don't need to be there. It is what it is. So that's my long way of saying that. I think there are too many white people who want a cookie. Or feel like they should have a cookie for the work that they have done up to this point. And I'm like, our work as Black people is never done. So your work as white people should never be done either. I think the biggest thing right now is that we are all actively in this, and we all actively have to be involved in getting rid of this. And, chattel slavery, yeah, it may be a thing of the past, but it is still very much present. And just because you're Black, just because you still reap or you still are harmed by it, right, to this day, like there's still elements of things that we all could be doing to kind of undo it. And I'm working through that myself. Like I said, I'm a lover of brands. I'm a label whore down to my feet, honey. But there are days where I'm like, yeah, girl, you want to go ahead and get that up, to make the world a little bit better. So, donate to your girls. If you got a little coin, send your trans friends some money, send the T-girls some change. That's how we, I'm just being real, send the TS girls, a little bit of some coin. That's how we all get liberated and free, right? If you see somebody out there who needs some help them, right? That's how we end the system.
You might think, or at first, the danger of having Black folks not know our own history about slavery is that we will resist in the moment. But I think the bigger danger for people who are invested in making sure that we don't know our history, besides the Black folks not knowing it so we don't get riled up. And besides maybe some white folks in our country not knowing it fully so that they don't get any ideas about to help us get riled up, I think the bigger thing is now understanding the connection between all those things that I mentioned before. Chattel slavery, the genocide of the indigenous folks, what has been going on for years in the Middle East, what's going on, what happened in and all over Africa, South Africa, like all over the world. It seems to be a lot. If you zoom out on planet Earth, it seems to be repeated stories of dominance and subjugation. And there's been wars forever. Cultures have fought, but what we're doing now is we are going in, we're bombing, we're destabilizing governments through force, extracting resources, natural resources from that place, changing the economic outcome of the people that are there, which make them indentured, essentially, like have to work on our economic terms for our economic purposes, not for whatever's good for whatever they were going, not allowing them to do what they were going to do had we not come there. Suddenly that place exists as a function of the Western world that dominates it now. And that's happened all over the globe. And that is the danger. If you can connect the Holocaust to chattel slavery and the hierarchy that happened there, if you can connect that to the genocide of the indigenous folks, if you can connect all these things, then suddenly your view has to change. Mine did, for sure.
Well, I think in the perfect world, your view has to change. But I think that for some people, they're just like, I know, but I just feel so helpless that
Mm-hmm.
that even if my view is changing, my actions won't. And I want to say, by the way, like if that is your stance, like it does not make you a bad person. Like I think that makes you a person. We are all
Mm-hmm.
able to end up in that same space because the system is larger than every person on the planet. It's larger than every country on the planet. These systems are all
Mm-hmm.
connected. And if you're like, my God, like, I don't know if there's a book called Afro Pessimism that I was reading in my book club did one book. We did one book and then we took a break. I think we'll be back when my book comes out, we'll be back. But the first and only book we read was called Afro Pessimism. And it is really easy to be like, yeah, well, it is what it is, and we're all fucked, and we will always be like this.
Mm.
Especially because the system is constantly getting stronger and
Yeah.
rarely weakening. Very rarely is it ever weakening.
Yeah. I mean, the system of, well, we talked about this before. I mean, capitalism is like now in later stages, and to the point that it enables billionaires, which is like unethical. You having a human being having more resources than everyone else on the planet is not how I can't say what we were meant to do, because anything that humans are doing is part of human nature, I would imagine. But like it's more than the capacity of of what the average person could even imagine. And so to be able to wrap our mind around all of the injustices that are currently happening in the world at the same time it's almost impossible, especially when you still have to live from day to day. You still have to find joy, and you have to eat, you have to figure out how you're going to work. You got to do all those things from day to day, which takes up most of your time anyway. And so it is
At least 8
difficult.
hours a day, 5 days
Yeah.
a week.
So it's difficult to sort of think within that framework. Obviously, there are people that do it, and it's important to do. But I do think that is going to be the next real type of liberation that we have, is going to be on a different plane as humanity, being able to think way outside of anything that we've ever, it's not just going to be like within, international boundaries. It's going to be like, I think the real liberation that we have, because we have perceived liberation, the illusion of liberation and freedom right now. the actual liberation is going to be like a spiritual, mental sort of next level thing, where we don't feel the need as humans to have war, where we don't feel the need, we are something above needing to have war and harm and hurt each other. Well, we will be using a different part of our brain that allows us to only seek good things. And that sounds loaded, to not seek things that are harmful to other people, especially knowing that for sake of war, you have to dehumanize people. And when we dehumanize others, we dehumanize ourselves. And so we won't be caught in this cycle of dehumanization. We will be the opposite of that. Rehumanization? I don't know.
I mean,
That's what I think the next plane is going to be.
Economists believe that Elon Musk is on track to be the world's first trillionaire by the year 2027, which I want to be clear to you all, I don't think we can fathom. And just to give you a point of reference for how much money that is, if Oprah Winfrey, Tyler Perry, and Taylor Swift were to combine, if Taylor Swift and Oprah and Tyler Perry both gave all their money to Oprah Winfrey would still be closer in income to a person who works minimum wage than she is to Elon Musk. That is how much money Elon Musk has. I'm gonna say it one more time.
12 zeros.
If Tyler Perry and Taylor Swift both gave every dollar they had, liquid and otherwise, to Oprah Winfrey, and she had all three of their wealth combined, she would still be closer in income to a person who works a minimum wage than she would be to Elon Musk. He has an absurd.
How many Oprahs make $1 trillion?
Well, to be fair, Elon Musk does not have $1 trillion yet. He does not have $1 trillion.
Right,
he has like $257 billion, and I think Oprah has like $5 billion or $6 billion or something like that.
Oprah has $3 billion.
$3 billion, and Elon Musk has like 250 something billion, I believe.
Wow,
an absurd amount of money. Like,
how many billions fit into $1 trillion? 1,000 billions is $1 trillion. And Oprah Winfrey has $3 billion.
Oprah, Venus and Serena's kid sister, no one talks about.
Oprah Williams.
But yeah, you know, money is wild and money is crazy. I was watching a documentary last night on Vince McMahon, who is the owner of.
I saw that Netflix thing. I didn't watch it.
Former owner of the WWE. And I was watching him talk about his need to like expand. So back in the day, wrestling had territories. They were invisible territories. Like everyone just kind of respected it. It was like there are the wrestlers who only do the Northeast, only do Florida, only do Georgia and Alabama. We just kind of just respect. It's kind of like it's like gangs,
like conferences.
Kind of, yeah, but they were not legally recognized. It was just like you would just never. There's no way that if you were from the WWE, you would never do a show in
WWF.
Florida. You would never do that. Well, WWE is called the WWE now because the World Wildlife Federation sued them because they were the WWF before. Anyway, that's not the point. The point is, so Vince McMahon was just going into other territories, and everyone else, all the other promoters, like, what the fuck are you doing? Whoa, like you just don't do this. And then it got so big that he just swallowed up every single competition there was, and now it is essentially the only mainstream wrestling platform that there is. He's not even with the company anymore because of his allegations. But like, I just find that really odd to be a miniature display of how greed, even though he had a great territory and he was very successful in that territory, he's like, it just is not enough. I want what you have. My plate is full, but I don't like that your plate is also full, and also your food just looks better, even though it's the same food. Somehow your plate looks warmer than mine. I want your plate too, and that guy next to you has a plate. I want that plate too, and that's essentially what we're doing all around the world. And we used to say in class, the sun never sets on the British Empire, and it was like a pride. It was like, my God, the sun never sets on the British Empire. Isn't that amazing? They achieved that, but they never really had the discussion about why the sun never sets on the British Empire. That was the conversation. All I kept hearing was the sun never sets on the British. But they were not like. And by the way, for that to happen, a lot of stealing, a lot of murder, a lot of killing, a lot of raping, a lot of pillaging, a lot of hunger, a lot of famine, a lot of subjugation, and a lot of genocide.
I think that it's impossible to not have those things. I mean, that's the point. In order for them to be sustainable and to keep going, In order to be hungry, if you're hungry, the only way to stop it is to keep eating. You don't just not eat. You don't eat once and then you're good for the rest of your life. You have to keep doing it. And so
But they're
all
not
that
hungry, they're
stuff has to
greedy.
continue to
They're
happen.
gluttonous. They're not hungry, they're
No, I know that they're
gluttonous.
gluttonous, but I'm saying like there's no capitalist world without subjugation and exploitation. Even though we did that, I think our thinking was we had slavery, we had slaves, it started this global empire, global, economy with, all these different things, coffee or not coffee, cotton and tobacco and all these different things and sugar out of this. And then that was that. But what we didn't realize is that we're still doing it in the same way or in a slightly changed way, but basically the same thing over, and it has to be consistent, has to constantly happen. And that's the part that's so upsetting to me, is that as Americans and probably as Westerners, we are benefiting from that, and we live within that system. And it's really difficult. Like fish are unaware of water. We are not really able to get out of it because we're so entrenched in it. And it runs everything. And Western culture is starting to dominate the world, the globe, in one way or another. If you don't join us, we're going to beat you. That's basically it.
Maybe Thanos had it right. Maybe Thanos
maybe he did, honey. Get them rings, get them jewels. I have this new ring here. It's pretty.
I have a safety pin, but I don't know if I can snap with that.
Let's clink them together and do something,
exactly,
honey.
and wipe out half of humanity.
This was only part one, and we have so much more to say about freedom, and we will be back in the next episode. In the meantime, we would love for you all to share this. Let us know what you think about this. I know we discussed some heavy topics in here, but when you're talking about freedom, what else can you do? We want to give some special thanks to our fabulous producers, executive producers, Tracy Marquez and Charlene Westbrook, our producer, Corey Nixon, our post-producer, Amelia Rittaler, and music by La Femme Bear.